Sound check. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. My name is Clay. And tonight I would like to pay respect to someone I never really knew. Not his name. I mean, anything about him, honestly, other than the fact that he worked for the U.S. Postal Service. Can I tell you the story of someone I didn't know? It's really strange being here tonight, having been tasked to share a story with you all. But when I was first invited, my mind just leapt right up the block to Astor Place, because a mailman was murdered there. Now, I'm not originally from New York. I grew up in Virginia. I could just barely remember my first trip to Manhattan. I couldn't have been any older than, say, like 6 or 7, but every memory that I'm going to offer you tonight is going to be a bit hazy, filtered through who I am now, so you're going to have to forgive me if I'm a little off about particular details. But if I'm being honest, I'd like to think that who I am has a little bit to do with this particular moment in my life, just me and this mailman. Now, this had to be somewhere around the early to mid-'80s. My mom is actually a potter, and she had been invited to do a craft fair up at Lincoln Center, and I was fortunate enough to come along. This was my very first trip to the Big Apple. I mean, as a boy, all I ever knew about New York is, from what I had seen in the movies or on TV. I had never ridden the subway, never walked along the corridor of skyscrapers, never seen the Empire State Building. But what I remember most out of anything is Astor Place. I remember the cube, giving it a spin. God, just imagine walking through New York City for the first time as a kid. Everybody was so tall. Skyscrapers in of themselves, just towering over top of me. I remember that I had to kind of crick my neck back just to see their faces. I remember holding my mom's hand. I remember her guiding me through the tangle of people. Everybody walked so closely together. It was like passing through a cornfield of gray and black business suits. Everybody was wearing business suits. And then I heard a shot. It's like a pop, really. There may have been more than one. I can't remember. But, there was nothing really explosive about it. It was just this, pitiful little pop in a city full of so much sound. And then everybody ducked. And I just remember, this forceful wind blowing everybody down. Just imagine a wind pushing through that cornfield, right? Flattening these stalks of people against the street again. There was a moment of commotion. And then people just started standing back up. There were some shouts, a few people ran, but for the most part, everybody just got back up onto their feet again. Except for this one man. Couldn't have been 5 or 10 steps ahead of me. It was a mailman. I remember the shale gray and blue uniform, the eagle emblem stitched across his chest. And he had been shot. I saw blood for the first time on someone that I did not know. Not on his body, but below. This faint blossom spreading across the concrete. There was a crowd gathering around him, and I remember all of these legs. Maybe it was just my height, but I remember seeing this mailman lying on his back, staring up at the sky, not blinking, through the tangle of all of these people's feet. He wasn't breathing. He wasn't moving. But what I remember more than anything else, anything in this moment, this story, is that my mother said to me, still holding my hand, and she said, say a prayer for that man. I mean, maybe she said, say a prayer for that man's family. I'm not sure, but I remember hearing the pinch in her voice. Say a prayer for that man. Now, religion was never really something a part of our family. I mean, I can remember saying grace at dinner a couple times, or maybe, prayers whenever I spent the night at my grandparents' house, but I had never been tasked with having to say a prayer for someone I didn't know, a complete stranger, and I felt the weight of it, the burden of responsibility. How was I supposed to say a prayer for a man I didn't know? And that's all I remember. That is all that I have of this moment from my childhood, over 40 years ago now. I mean, I don't know who shot him or why. I can't even remember if I've ever asked my mother about it, but I have these kind of synapses and narrative that suggest that this man was mugged for his mailbag. But I don't know. Other than it happened 10 feet in front of me. But I still have his prayer. I don't offer it every time I walk through Astor Place, but every so often when I'm walking through, I'll think about him, how close we were for this brief moment. I will think about his family, and I will say a prayer for him. Storytelling is the only prayer that I have. If I can share a simple story with you, share the life of a man who I never knew, who you'll never know, never meet, so that maybe the next time you walk through Astor Place, you might think of him, who he was. And you might say a prayer for him as well. Doesn't need to be a prayer. I mean, all I'm asking for is for you to think of him. And just tell someone's story. It's a strange favor, I know, forgive me. But this is the one time, the only time I have ever been able to share this story and feel like it could matter. It's the only time that I've ever shared this story out loud with anybody. I want you to remember someone you never met. I want you to say a prayer for that man. I want you to say a prayer for that man's family. Thank you.